Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, I wanted to do a little bit of a video on this. I was supposed to do it yesterday, but things ended up coming up, so I was not able to do it yesterday. But, anyways, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would do this little video reviewing this one Fannon International Boxing video about the Teofimo Lopez versus George Kambosos Jr. fight, which of course in my opinion was a very interesting fight. Now of course for those of us that had the privilege of watching it, and for those of us all in all that know what happens, we know that Teofimo Lopez of course ended up getting majorly upset because of course George Kambosos, I believe that he was something along the lines of a 13-1 underdog. Now, in my opinion, George Kambosos probably would have not been that much of an underdog. He probably would have been more like a 7-1 underdog, somewhere around there. And the reason why I say that is because I did watch George Kambosos before, and although I did expect Teofimo Lopez to beat George Kambosos, because I thought all in all that he was more talented than George Kambosos all in all is a decent boxer. He does have some faults, but I did think all in all that I like what I saw from his Mickey Bay and Lee Selby performances. Now, I don't necessarily think that either Mickey Bay or Lee Selby are necessarily A-grade fighters, but beating them really tells me at least that, you're at least a decent B-grade fighter. And that's what I thought George Kambosos was. I thought that he was going to be a decent B-grade fighter, but he showed himself, at least in the Teofimo Lopez fight, that he at least has to be recognized as an A-grade fighter. Whether you rank him as an A fighter or an A- fighter, that's up to you. Personally, I would probably rank him as an A- fighter. And a certain amount of people may say, well, he just beat Teofimo Lopez, the unified champion. Why would you call him an A- fighter? Because I'm not really sure if George Kambosos, I'm not really sure if he's going to be able to compete with a lot of the other top elite athletes there. I'm talking about Vasyl Lomachenko. I'm talking about Devin Haney. I'm talking about Gervonta Tank Davis, even Shakur Stevenson or Oscar Valdez. If he were able to move up, well, maybe he would have a little bit of an easier time with something like Oscar Valdez or Shakur Stevenson, possibly because maybe they're his own size. You can tell that George is a natural 135 pounder. But some of these guys that he's going to be facing are either highly skilled, like a Vasyl Lomachenko, or on top of that, when it comes to Devin Haney, not only are highly skilled, but decently bigger than you, have a decent reach advantage over you, and probably should be naturally facing at 140 pounds anyway. But when it comes down to it all in all, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what George Kambosos does. Let's see, who knows? Maybe he can beat some of those fighters. I highly doubt it. But, some people, they may disagree with me. It just is what it is. But I think the reason why he was able to defeat Teofimo Lopez, and I certainly did have Teofimo Lopez in my top 10 pound for pound and as an A-grade fighter, so no doubt about it. I have to give George Kambosos Jr. some credit here, no doubt about it. But I think a big part of the reason why he was able to defeat Teofimo Lopez in the fashion that he was able to was because, like I said in my old prediction that was months ago, when I thought that this fight was first supposed to happen, I think that was around July. Wasn't too far off from the first time when the Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder trilogy was supposed to happen. And of course, that fight was canceled because of the COVID situation. But anyways, when it comes down to it all in all, I predicted Teofimo Lopez to win the fight, probably by knockout within about the first 6 or 7 rounds. I thought that George Kambosos may give Teofimo Lopez or may give him a little bit of problems because they fight so similarly. And like I said, when you fight someone that fights in your type of style, that may be the toughest type of matchup for you. And Teofimo Lopez, he didn't just have a whole bunch of problems with George Kambosos. He almost got embarrassed. I'm not going to say that this fight was not close, but for the fighter that George Kambosos is, in my opinion, and don't get me wrong, he is a decently good fighter. But Teofimo Lopez, with all the athletic gifts that he has, he should have not lost this fight. It just is what it is. Anyways, Fannon, he's going to talk about Teofimo Lopez, all in all, where he goes from here. And is Teofimo Lopez a hypocrite? Because, of course, what we know, what Teofimo Lopez said about Deontay Wilder, when Deontay Wilder was making all those bitch-ass excuses when he lost to Tyson Fury, when it came down to it, Teofimo Lopez was one of the people to call out Deontay Wilder, and he said that he was acting like a bitch. And I don't really have a problem with Teofimo Lopez saying that because it's the truth. It is what it is. People can get mad at that all they want to, but Deontay Wilder was acting like one. He was acting like a Class A biatch. It just is what it is. All right, especially with those damn bullshit excuses that you were making. But Teofimo Lopez did not show off very much better or in a better fashion at all because, of course, he ended up making a whole lot of excuses or all in all certain things, after the fight as well when he lost to George Kambosos. So it's not like Teofimo Lopez. I mean, I'm not saying that he made the same dumbass excuses that Deontay Wilder made, but he certainly did make some excuses, no doubt about it. And to say that to think that you won that fight 10 rounds to 2 is absolutely just out of pocket. I mean, it's completely delusional, no doubt about it whatsoever. But anyways, we're gonna talk about that all video. We're gonna see what Fannon has to say. We're also gonna talk about, do I believe that after this fight, is Teofimo Lopez a hype job? Where do I think he goes from here? Let's talk about it. Let's get into the video.
All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fannon. In this video, we're going to talk about Teofimo Lopez being an absolute hypocrite and ducking out on the George Kambosos rematch to try to go up to 140 pounds. Tell you, man, can't make this stuff up, but we're going to cover it anyway. Let's talk about that in this video.
Well, Fannon, he says all in all that, Teofimo is ducking out of the George Kambosos, rematch. I'm not sure if he's ducking out of there. Now, he could be, who the hell knows, because Teofimo may not want that work again, who knows, but I am a firm believer that Teofimo Lopez, that he truly can no longer make 135 pounds. Teofimo is about my age, which, is about 22, 23 years old when it comes down to it. So, so some people, they can reach their full peak potential of growth when they're about that age, but the body may not actually truly reach its physical prime, maybe even until sometimes about 25 years old. And it's going to be very, very hard to stay at 135 pounds for someone like a Teofimo Lopez or a Devin Haney for much longer, because you can tell that they don't really naturally belong there with their height, with their stature, and with their size, with their, muscle bound. They belong at 140 pounds at least. When I seen Teofimo Lopez against George Kambosos Jr., for those of you overall that may have seen the new Jungle Book movie that came out a few years ago, that was directed by Jon Favreau, I believe, or whatever his name is. For those of you that may be into those new CGI Disney movies or Disney movies in general. For those of you that remember the CGI fight between Shere Khan and Bagheera, because we all know, of course, a tiger is bigger than that of a jaguar. That's pretty much overall what this fight looked like. That's what this looked like. It looked like Teofimo Lopez was at least 1.5 to 2 times the size of George Kambosos in terms of stature. When I'm not talking about height, I'm not even necessarily talking about reach. But when you take a look at his back, when you take a look overall at his size, that's exactly what it looked like. It looked like it was a tiger going up against a jaguar in there. Teofimo Lopez, he does not belong at 135 pounds. I don't even think he can make it anymore. He very clearly is draining himself there when it comes down to it. And Teofimo Lopez, he is going to have to move up to 140 pounds soon. I don't know if he can make 135 pounds anymore. I just don't know if it's physically possible. But we'll see what happens.
All right, welcome back to the channel. This is the day after a fight, big fight, an unexpectedly entertaining fight between Teofimo Lopez and George Kambosos. Teofimo Lopez gets beat by George Kambosos, loses his undisputed title, what they claim to be an undisputed title, IBF, WBC, WBA, and WBC franchise belt all of a sudden. Like, man, all of a sudden the franchise belt, you can win it in a ring. Who would have known? How convenient. But regardless, Teofimo Lopez loses to George Kambosos, and after the fight is over, his father and he make a whole bunch of excuses about why they lost that fight, show poor sportsmanship in refusing to accept their defeat, says that they believe that...
I agree. And for him to say all in all that he won 10 rounds out of that fight, or for them to say that he won 10 rounds out of that fight, I don't even know if I can call that delusional. I think Teofimo Lopez knows damn well that he did not win 10 rounds out of that fight. I mean, how do you possibly think that you won 10 rounds? I mean, Teofimo, I guess his point is that he thought all in all that he threw the more impactful punches. But dude, there were some of those rounds where you were barely throwing because you were very clearly afraid to throw back with George Kambosos, because he was countering your ass all night long, especially with that good overhand right that he had. It just is what it is. So Teofimo, he can talk all that shit all he wants to, so can his father, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, Teofimo knows that he got someone outboxed. I don't want to hear any shit from him.
They were robbed. Also, Teofimo Lopez Sr. said that he believed that Teofimo Jr. won every round of the fight, and it was an easy fight for him. The only mistake that they had made in preparing for the fight was keeping Teofimo Lopez at 135 pounds. And that he was so he stayed in that weight class too long. So now they're going to move up to 140 pounds and chase a undisputed fight, the fight with the undisputed champion at 140 pounds, who is Josh Taylor. Man, is not that is.
If Teofimo Lopez fights Josh Taylor next, he's going to be in for a very rude awakening. If he thought that George Kambosos' loss was bad, wait till he faces Josh Taylor. And Josh Taylor, in my opinion, he is within my top 10 pound per pound. But I don't know if Josh Taylor is going to defeat a certain amount of those other A-class fighters, especially if he was going to move up to the welterweight division. Like, even if he were to face Danny Garcia, he could beat him, but, it's not a 100% for certain in my opinion. Josh Taylor is a great fighter, don't get me wrong, but he's another A to A minus fighter. I'd probably give him the good class of A. But would I say that he's A plus? I'm not necessarily sure about that because I don't think any of the fighters that he defeated at 140 pounds were A plus either. I don't think that Regis Prograis is an A plus fighter. I don't think that Jose Ramirez is an A plus fighter. And I certainly don't think Victor Postol is an A plus fighter. So it is what it is.
Isn't that ironic?
However, if Teofimo moves up to face Josh Taylor, Teofimo, if he fights anywhere near to what he did in this fight against Josh Taylor, he's going to get stopped in that fight. Because Teofimo, he looked absolutely horrible in that fight. Absolutely horrible. Teofimo, and I knew that he always had a little bit of problems with head movement also. And, maybe his feet aren't always the fastest. But he made George Kambosos look like, he made George Kambosos look like Terrence Crawford in there. He made him overall look like he was another version of Floyd Mayweather Jr. in there. George Kambosos, and don't get me wrong, I don't think that he's on that level, but he is a very decent boxer. But Teofimo, he just was not able to counter anything that George Kambosos was throwing at him. He was not able to get past the jab. He was not able to get past the left hook, the overhand right. He ended up basically getting, comboed by the same combinations over and over and over and over. And Teofimo really had no answers. His head movement was very, very poor. His defensive responsibility was even poorer when it came down to it. His foot movement really was not that good. His foot speed was very, very slow. And on top of that, a lot of the times, he was very flat-footed. There's almost nothing positive I can say about Teofimo Lopez from this performance, at least against George Kambosos. The only thing I can say is that Teofimo, in my opinion, was more athletically talented than George Kambosos. But other than that, George Kambosos was able to outskill him in almost every single category. Every single category. Counterpunching, defensive responsibility, even sometimes keeping his hands up at certain points. And, neither fighter are known for keeping their hands up a lot of the times. But when it comes down to it all in all, Teofimo looked very, very poor in this fight.
The same guy, Teofimo Lopez, who literally stood up there and called Deontay Wilder a bitch for all the excuses that he made in losing to Deontay Wilder, now finds himself in a situation where he gets beat pretty convincingly. To me and many observers.
Well, what I'll say is this. I think that this fight was close. And, of course, when it comes to Fannon, and I don't always disagree with Fannon, I don't always agree with him either, but when it comes down to it, one thing you do have to watch out about Fannon is that Fannon is a major Deontay Wilder fan. So what that means is that whenever it comes to his boy Deontay Wilder, I'll give Fannon this much credit. I don't think that it's a good thing to be a fanboy of anybody, but at least Fannon overall, is a true fan of Deontay Wilder. Because a lot of people like Dante's Boxing Nation, they threw Deontay Wilder completely under the bus right as soon as he lost to Tyson Fury. So that really shows you what type of a person Dante's Boxing Nation actually is. He didn't necessarily admit that he was wrong necessarily. He didn't have a logical awakening. All he did basically was throw Deontay Wilder under the bus and say, well, Tyson Fury nor Deontay Wilder really ain't that good. Just so he could not give Tyson Fury some credit. That's what Dante decided to do. So it is what it is. But like I said, I don't have a problem with Teofimo, saying that about Deontay Wilder at the time. And certain people, of course, may not like it, but it is what it is because at the time, Teofimo was absolutely correct. Deontay Wilder, all in all, he was making a bunch of excuses. It is what it is. And probably some of the worst excuses that I've personally ever seen in my life. But it is what it is. When it comes down to it, all in all, though, if you're going to criticize someone else for something, then you better not do that same thing. Or you better overall handle that situation in a better light. And Teofimo Lopez did not handle that situation in a better light. Unfortunately, what you find out about most athletes, and it's understandable to a degree because their ego is very, very high and their pride is very, very high, most athletes end up being sore losers. That's why you hear overall of a bunch of cases like when Peyton Manning, when he lost to Drew Brees, he would not even shake his hand, I believe, all in all, after he lost that Super Bowl. Or, when you talk about Aaron Rodgers or LeBron James, they're known for, they're known for throwing certain teammates under the bus or certain coaches under the bus. When it comes down to it, Deontay Wilder cannot accept his defeat. George Foreman cannot accept his defeat. Vasily Lomachenko cannot accept his defeat. Manny Pacquiao has not accepted several of his defeats. He'll tell you to this day that, all in all, he did not lose those fights or he lost those fights because of something. Unfortunately, that's most athletes, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, if you want to get better and if you want to be the best version of you that you can be, sometimes you just have to take that shot on the chin and just move on and just overall try to learn the best from it that you can, and all in all, just try to do better next time.
This was not a close fight. This was a fight in which Teofimo Lopez...
Well, I don't agree with that. I think that it was a competitive fight. That's why all the scores, I think, were somewhat decently close. The first scorecard, I believe, was 115 to 111 for George Kambosos. Now, that's about 8 rounds to 4, I believe. Could even be a little bit wider, I'm not sure. But when it comes down to it, all in all, it's not like it was a complete blowout, in my opinion. Then another card, I believe, was 114 to 113 for Teofimo. That was extremely close. And like I said, I personally scored it for George Kambosos, but I do understand why maybe that judge scored it the way that he did. And then on top of that, there was another judge that I believe scored it 115 to 112 for George Kambosos. So it's not like this fight was a landslide, in my opinion. But Teofimo Lopez clearly was getting outboxed here, no doubt about it.
May have gotten a few rounds. Looked like for a minute there he might be able to get George Kambosos out of there because he got a knockdown and he was looking stronger. But after that faded, George Kambosos went right back to work doing what he was doing before the knockout took place. Bloodies Teofimo Lopez. I mean, literally just streams of blood flying off of his face. Head flying back on a regular basis. But Teofimo Lopez claims that he was robbed. So I find it very, very, very interesting, man, that a guy that would say those type of things about Deontay Wilder literally called him a bitch for saying that he thought that Tyson Fury cheated him. Now obviously believes that there is cheating in boxing because the judges, who I do believe gave the fight to, I think it was maybe one was a...
Well, there is cheating in boxing, but, let's also be real about Deontay Wilder here for a second. Deontay Wilder was making some of the worst excuses that I've personally ever heard in my life. I mean, egg weights in the glove and all in all, I'm trying to think of even some of the other excuses. The costume wore him down when it came down to it. And yes, that excuse was true. The LDBC tried to lie about it and say that a reviewer made it up. No, he did not. Deontay Wilder actually went on the Joe Rogan show, I believe, and actually said it point blank. So you can go ahead and check that out for yourself. I mean, there were so many dumbass excuses that Deontay Wilder had. I mean, it really was baffling.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think maybe one scorecard was a draw, and I think the other two had it for George Kambosos. Regardless, man.
One scorecard, I believe, was 114 and 113 for Teofimo, while the other two were for George Kambosos. I believe the scores were 115 to 111 and 115 to 112 for George Kambosos, which in my opinion, that's pretty decently fair.
Pretty much 99 out of 100 people they believe that George Kambosos won that fight. I think George Kambosos won that fight going away, and it's ridiculous for him to say that. Anyway, or at least it's hypocritical for him to say that. So, that's just kind of a lesson to boxers. Don't go pointing fingers. and complaining about what other people are doing. If you, when push comes to shove, you're not willing to live by this and abide by the same standards that you set for other people. That, my friend, is absolutely
I would agree with that.
hypocrisy. Now, also, he says that he's not interested in the rematch with George Kambosos. That he's going to go up to 140 pounds to fight Josh Taylor, and I want to know,
If you go up and face Josh Taylor, if you're Teofimo Lopez, once again, in my opinion, Teofimo, what he should do is that he probably, all in all, should probably face some of the easier contenders at first. Maybe face a Ivan Baranchek, maybe face, a Mario Barrios or a Jose Zepeda, someone who, they may be decent for the division, but they're not really a world beater. Because if you face someone like a Jose Ramirez or Regis Prograde or a Josh Taylor in your next fight, I don't see you lasting in any of those fights, man. To be quite honest with you, all those guys have decent power for their division. They have decent skills. And if Teofimo fights anywhere near to the way that he did in this fight, now maybe, who knows, maybe he looked worse because of the weight drain. I don't know. But when it comes down to it, I don't think it would be a good idea to step in the ring with any of those fighters.
why
At
would
least not now.
Josh Taylor fight Teofimo Lopez at this point? Teofimo Lopez is not coming up there as as an undisputed champion, fellow fighter that is in the top 10 pound for pound. He's coming off of a guy that lost to somebody that was a massive favorite, that he was a massive favorite to beat. In some betting books, they had it, he was minus 2,000, right? Minus 2,000.
Yes, I heard the odds were somewhere around 13-1, which I think personally is a little bit too wide, but I understand.
In that fight. So I'm not quite sure what Teofimo Lopez offers to Josh Taylor for that, for to get a shot at all of those belts. If Teofimo Lopez is like anybody else, Teofimo Lopez has got to go back to the drawing board and work his way back up to get into contention. Now, I'm not going to say that Teofimo Lopez does not have the talent or doesn't have the ability to do that, but,
And that's kind of where I'll talk about this here. Do I believe that Teofimo Lopez is a hype job? I don't believe that he's a hype job, but what I will say is this. I think that the biggest win that you were able to get over Vasyl Lomachenko, I think that a big part of the reason why you were able to win that is because Vasyl Lomachenko, even though he is a great fighter, he's a guy that 135 pounds, that's really going to be his max weight class, because Vasyl Lomachenko rehydrates, I believe, at about 142 pounds when it comes down to it. So that means that he's really probably a natural 130 pounder. That's really what Vasyl Lomachenko is. Now, he is, and some of these guys that he's facing at 135, I mean, they're really almost two weight divisions bigger than him. Because, Teofimo and Devin Haney, they're not really natural 135 pounders. These guys are natural 140 pounders. They have about a 71 to 72 inch reach when it comes down to it, compared to Vasyl Lomachenko's like 65 inch reach. And on top of that, Teofimo's an A-grade puncher. Vasyl, this is why he cannot be compared on the Canelo level, even if he were able to beat Teofimo in the rematch, because Vasyl Lomachenko already lost that first Teofimo fight. And Vasyl, even though I think that he is an A-grade fighter, and I think that he is an A-class skilled fighter, he does not have the same punch resistance of a Canelo Alvarez. He does not, all in all, have the ability to take those type of punches or even risk it, because that's the big part of the reason why he lost that fight. Because Vasyl Lomachenko couldn't risk getting hit in that fight and getting knocked out. That's why he was so cautious. And that's why he ended up losing that fight, because he did not take enough chances. I think that he was thinking maybe that Teofimo hopefully would open up a little bit later on and maybe would gas out, but it just didn't happen in that fight because Lomachenko wasn't attacking him enough until the second half of the fight, and by that time it was too late. So it is what it is.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Regis Prograde was a champion. He lost his belt to Josh Taylor. Now he's at 140 pounds, working himself up there. There are other guys at 140 pounds that are looking to get those title shots, that have done work at 140 pounds and are not coming off of losses. Robert Easter Jr. is out there. He lost his lightweight championship to Mikey Garcia. He's trying to get back in line to get a championship as well.
Robert Easter really is not that talented. I've never really been overly impressed with Robert Easter. Maybe Teofimo could possibly face him next, but that would even be a dangerous challenge because Robert Easter, even though I don't think that he's an A-grade fighter, Robert Easter is very tall and he's got a decent reach. So Teofimo would have to be very careful in that fight as well. The Teofimo is a very talented boxer, but he, at least athletically and physically, but he needs a lot of sharpening when it comes to his style. He needs way better feet. He needs faster feet. He needs to be more on the balls of his feet and not flat-footed at times. Fighting a little bit too tall. On top of that, you need way better head movement and you need way better defensive responsibility. And I've seen better defensive responsibility out of Teofimo in the past, but for whatever reason, he made this fight super duper easy for George Kambosos in some of these rounds.
No, so I'm not sure what about Teofimo Lopez makes him be able to jump right to the front of the line for a shot at undisputed against Josh Taylor. I don't believe that he's ever proven that he was some big gigantic draw, even though it did look like they had a pretty decent sized crowd in Madison Square Garden. I'm not sure if they were fighting in the big room, like the big ballroom, or a small ballroom or not. But, I know for certain that when, or at least this is what Leonard Ellerby said, when Triller was trying to make the fight in I think it was in Miami, when they said that they had J-Lo, J-Lo was going to be performing for Triller or whatever, that they had like a 35,000 seat arena and they only sold like 1,800 tickets leading into it. So, and then going over to the UK, where I suppose he says this fight should be, Josh Taylor, I'm not sure why Teofimo Lopez is going to make a whole ton of people come out for that fight for Josh Taylor any more so than anybody else would. And the other question is it really smart for Teofimo Lopez to go in there against Josh Taylor after what he looked like against Teofimo Lopez? If he goes in there,
I agree. I don't think that it personally is a smart decision because I don't think Teofimo at this point, I'm not sure if he can beat Josh Taylor, but we'll see.
Believing what his father said, which is, look, man, that was an easy fight for us. We won every round. The only problem was that we got robbed. You go up there against Josh Taylor, and you go there to fight Josh Taylor in Scotland. What do you think is going to happen there? Josh Taylor is a better fighter than George Kambosos, at least in my estimation. And
I agree.
And just for the record, let me give George Kambosos his flowers and give that man credit for pulling off that fight. He fought extremely well in that fight, executed what he wanted to execute. The guy was obviously ready, prepared for Teofimo Lopez. So, I'm sorry that Teofimo Lopez going pop may, distract a little bit from the win of George Kambosos, but there's a whole lot of things that were leading into this fight that could lead people to believe that, especially when George Kambosos himself said it, like, look, man, I see you. You're not training for the fight. You're not in condition for the fight. You're drained. You're a drained little boy, and I'm going to beat you. You're drained. You can't make the weight, right? So George Kambosos himself is acknowledging that Teofimo Lopez was weight drained. Not that diminishes from him because he went in there and did what he's supposed to do. But, all around, I mean, I just find it very, very funny. Or not funny in a humorous way, but just in an ironic way, that Teofimo Lopez would dump on Deontay Wilder like that about making excuses, and then to turn around and just make absolutely outlandish excuses for this fight, saying that he thought that the fight that they won every round. How could you win every round in a round you got dropped in? He did.
Well, Teofimo, all in all, basically what they were saying is that they won 10 rounds to 2. So, but no. Once again, for those of us that are logical and objective, I don't even think Teofimo thinks that he won 10 rounds because he made that bullshit excuse overall to where he said, oh, well, I haven't spent much time with my son, or, as a red herring, I haven't spent much time with my son, and, he's only born a certain amount of weeks ago, and, I want to spend more time with him. That's always the be-all when it comes down to whenever a fighter gets their ass whooped. That's the same shit that Cody Garbrandt said. Don't get me wrong, of course it's great, to spend time with your family and your newborn son or kid or whatever it is, but, that's what people always say whenever they get their ass whooped. It was the same shit that happened with Cody Garbrandt when he got his ass whooped against TJ Dillashaw in that rematch in the UFC. And after TJ won by knockout, because Cody hated TJ Dillashaw with the burning passion when it came down to those two hated each other. And Cody Garbrandt, after he got knocked out, he said, "Oh well, all that matters is my family is here, and I got a new son." And it's like, yeah, whatever. We all know you're crying on the inside, but it is what it is. It's the same shit with Teofimo. Not trying to be an ass or anything like that, but we all know how you truly feel.
The deck. Do you think maybe he won every round except for the round that you got dropped in? You know what I'm saying? But he didn't say that. He said he believes that they won every round. So anyway, it is what it is. I'm looking very much forward to see who George Kambosos is going to fight next and what Teofimo Lopez is going to do moving forward. Very entertaining fight. Good night of boxing. Make sure you let me know what you think in the comment section. Also, hit the like button, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And with that, I'm out. Peace.
So that's really about it for today. But I just wanted to talk about that because this Teofimo Lopez conversation, in my opinion, was very, very interesting. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.